Yes, sir. Welcome back to Real Spit with Spitty. I'm your host, Spitty Will. And first of all, I just want to thank everybody for supporting the channel, watching the videos, leaving comments, engaging, with these videos. Now, if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so that you know when we dropping videos, we're releasing new content every Monday and Wednesday. And we might even surprise y'all with some archive content on Thursdays. So make sure to hit that notification bell and stay in tap with the channel. Now, if you're watching this video, like, comment, please. Make sure to, give us some feedback and let's have a conversation. I'm jumping to comments and, talking back. So, and let me know what other topics you guys want to, hear me talking about. Now, people ask me, a lot who are on the come up and, trying to, get their foot in the game, if it's necessary to move away from your hometown to see success. Now, I don't say that it's a must that you do that, but I definitely recommend it. For me, growing up in Milwaukee, 22nd and Townsend, I knew from an early age that I wanted to move away. I knew that I wanted to leave home. I used to say when I was younger, like, man, in my lifetime, I'm gonna live in LA, I'm gonna live in New York. I also wanted to live in London. I didn't know why. I just knew that, London was another hub when it came for entertainment and fashion and things like that. So I was just dreaming big, when I was younger. And I definitely lived in LA and New York. I visited London, and after eating that food, after having fish and chips and green peas, I decided totally against that. Like that, London just can't be a place for me to live, man. The food don't have enough seasoning for me. I had to import, some Cajun seasoning, some paprika, some, I had to, hook it up for real because that food just wasn't it. I don't think I had anything that was really worth anything when I was over in London. So definitely wouldn't live there. But I believe that moving away from home, that's another part of stepping outside of your comfort zone, that you guys hear me talking about, which is an important step in growth. For me, I knew early on that I wanted to leave. First moved away when I was 17 years old. I went to Minneapolis, went to school at the University of Minnesota, got my undergrad degree up there. And I knew early on that I wanted to leave the mill just because it was so dangerous in my city. My neighborhood was a war zone. Every day, something would, go on in the neighborhood. We hear gunshots, sirens, you was constantly just having to watch your back, you just had to be savvy, and you could get tricked, real quick. I mean, I even remember, my granddad had bought me a Milwaukee Brewers hat, some cats in the neighborhood that I thought I was cool with. See, I also had this problem when I was younger. I thought everybody was my friend. I thought everybody was happy to, see me come up and, the little come ups, you know what I mean? Like getting some new sneakers or getting a new baseball cap or something like that. I thought that everybody was happy, for me or whatever. I remember this cat asked me if he could see my hat. And I let him see it. I ain't think nothing of it. And yeah, I never saw that hat again, and I didn't want to fight for the hat. I didn't want to fight, you know what I mean? Like I was a scary cat. And I knew some of these dudes, like what they had done, you know what I mean? Like some of the things that they had done. And so I'm like, all right, like I'm not about to fight over a hat. So, got my hat took. But just, growing up, I knew that I wanted to leave the crib and that I didn't want to fall victim, So at 17, when I graduated high school, I left, went up to University of Minnesota. Even during that time, I barely came home during my breaks because of my fear of being a statistic. Like I seriously had fear that I would come home and something might happen to me, So, and I never wanted to be caught up in the wrong place, at the wrong time. And some people watching this video might laugh when I say that, and I'm just being open and just being transparent with it. Not that I was a scary cat, but the fact that I just knew that like bigger things were meant for me. And I knew that, I was walking on a path to greatness. And so I had to eliminate as many situations that could happen that could, potentially take me away from continuing to walk this path of greatness. So during my breaks, I mean, I got a job and I was on the radio station up there in Minnesota. So during my breaks, I would rarely go to Milwaukee. And all my family's from Memphis. So I would link with my moms down in Memphis, which Memphis ain't a better city. Like, you know what I mean? Shit, Memphis is one of the most treacherous places too. So I'm not saying that I was escaping Milwaukee by going down there by any means, but that's where a majority of my family is. So we would go down there and visit, for Thanksgiving, Christmas, things like that. But then I got an opportunity right after 9/11. I have fear that look, fear, that's a common denominator of a reason why a lot of us don't achieve some of the things we want to achieve. But then I'm just being real and saying these words. A lot of people won't say that, but I'm just keeping it real. When 9/11 happened, I was fearful that we wasn't gonna be able to travel and that wasn't, gonna be something that we could do. And I was like, damn, okay, like now I'm not about to be able to get to LA and for sure not gonna be able to get to New York because when them planes hit the buildings, I just thought it was over with, and I didn't even have a desire to live in New York no more. So a couple months after 9/11, I ended up meeting this guy who lived in LA but was from Milwaukee and wrote for The Source. My mentor, Rob Biko Baker, and he was the culture and politics editor at The Source, had a lot of experience, community organizing, in journalism. He had a platform called contrabanded.com. And so I connected with him and we put in a lot of work together. So basically, whenever, I remember connecting with him and his partner, Ryan, shout out to Ryan Ford, they gave me an opportunity. I remember they sent me a shoebox full of mini cassettes. Cause see, in the early years of journalism, they would do interviews using these mini cassettes. Actually, I can even show y'all one. So, cause y'all know I keep all my vintage stuff. So this is the mini cassette player that I actually used to do like some of my first interviews on. And so you know, open that joint up, put a mini tape in there, and you'd hit record, and basically you do your interview and you be holding this cassette, to you or to the person that you interviewing in person. Or if you was doing an interview over the phone, then you would connect it to the phone to the landline, which is crazy, and you could record your conversation that you having with whoever you interviewing. So I remember they sent me a shoebox full of those tapes, and I had to transcribe all the interviews, basically listen to the interview, type everything word for word, even if they coughed, if they laughed, like every emotion that was expressed, over their conversation, I would have transcribed that and send it back to them so that they could then put together their interviews and their features and things like that they was doing for The Source. I was happy to work. I was, when I was interning, like I was hella enthusiastic, and whatever they needed, I was there. But then I would also share game and put my input in so that I could show my value and show, just how much knowledge and love that I have for the culture as well, which they saw. And they told me, hey, why don't you come to LA, see how we work out here, just get yourself like engulfed in all of this of what we're doing, just giving me an opportunity to get out of Minneapolis whenever I had some type of break. So instead of, going and kick it with my partners in Cancun and, taking trips like that a lot of folks was doing back then, or, going to Myrtle Beach or whatever it may be, I was on a plane out to LA. As soon as I remember my first trip, as soon as I, got to LA, I was, you know, hitting the ground moving. I never forget, they took me over to Leimert Park, over to the Liquor Bank, which the Liquor Bank is famous, in a lot of, LA movies. Menace to Society, I think it was in Players Club as well. The Liquor Bank is a place, is a spot, is a liquor store in Leimert Park and Leimert Park is, it's like it's a black area in LA that is full of culture, art, like a lot of different shops, and then a lot of barber shops, beauty salons, things like that over there. One of my favorite spots, Earl's Grill, is over there in Leimert Park. There's like a big mega church over in Leimert Park. I forget the name of it, but I know it's really famous. And so anyway, they took me to the liquor bank. Lisa Ray was the spokesperson for Hennessy. So I'm 19 years old in LA for the first time, meeting Lisa Ray. Um, tripping. This is around the time, Players Club that came out, and she was, super popular and all that. And I got an opportunity to, meet her, and she gave me some bottles of Hennessy. I'm like, hey, I looked like I was over 21, so shit, they hooked me up. And it was dope, man. Hooked me up with 2 bottles of Hennessy XO. I just remembered just, it was like as soon as I got off the plane, like we hit the ground running and I'm already seeing famous people and I'm in the mix. And, they're like, yo, this our little homie from Milwaukee. He out here, getting his stripes. And so it was just a dope opportunity. Me doing that and me, being able to like get that exposure just opened my eyes and inspired me so much more, go even harder, in terms of working and, and making sure that I finished school so that I could get out to LA when I graduated. And that was my plan from my first trip in LA, meeting Lisa Ray. Then the second thing I did was went and linked with Snoop. We was on the set of the Doggy Fizzle Televizzle show that he had on MTV. From being exposed to these things, I knew that I wanted to move to LA. So I remember I immediately changed my phone number. I had a 414, the Milwaukee area code phone number. I immediately changed that to a 310 number so that I knew that people would pick up the phone more if they got a call from somebody from a LA number, from a California number, more than they would pick up something that said Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So first thing I did was switch my phone number up to a Cali number. And basically every trip, every opportunity that I had outside of like Christmas and Thanksgiving, every opportunity that I had to go to LA, I was in LA. I made plans to move to LA when I graduated. And so as soon as I graduated, I went to go see my family in Memphis. We hung out for Christmas. And then New Year's Day, I was in LA living out there. This was New Year's Day of 2006. I moved out to LA and was couch surfing, living at my boy's Ryan house. My brother had actually just moved out to LA and was pursuing getting his MBA. It was like just perfect timing. He was going to USC. And so then he let me sleep on his couch a few nights out of the week. And, so I had a solid foundation, of family and friends, thank God. And I just took the chance out there. I remember my brother didn't think it was a good idea for me to come to LA just because I didn't have solid plans. I didn't have a secure job out there, but I had goals. And I knew that if I got out to LA, that I would seize all the opportunities that came my way and that I would, make the best out of them. And so when I finished school, I moved out there and that was just what I did. I got my first internship at Jordan Brand, working for Reggie Saunders. Shout out to him. He's still the head of Jordan Brand. And Echo Haddix gave me an opportunity to intern for her PR firm. And she, a legendary publicist who was working with E40 and Too Short and a bunch of different I think back then, like she was representing a lot of the video vixens that would be like in the music videos and stuff like that. And she just, just had the game on lock. So I just took advantage of so many opportunities. Then I remember February came, All-Star Weekend. It was in Houston. And so my other mentor, Ryan, he allowed me to come out to Houston and write a part of the cover story for the Great Day in Houston cover. And so I interviewed Chameleon there, did a dope piece. It was just a dope experience. And I remember, like even getting to see some of my partners in Houston while I was out there. And the source photo shoot, working with Echo. She was working with Allen Iverson at his club that he used to have in Houston, Club AI, and like was, she was a part of throwing like a couple of the All-Star Weekend parties. So I'm like working all of these parties, working the front door, or you know what I mean, like just getting in where I fit in. You feel me? And so I say all this to say that I took advantage of all of these opportunities that I had. And if I would have let the fear of living in another city push me to go back home to Milwaukee when I was done with college, then I never would have stepped into, all of these opportunities that I ended up, having. And a few months later, in LA, I ended up getting my first label job at Geffen Records because Ron Fair produced for the Pussycat Dolls, Keisha Cole, Mary J. Blige. he was moving from A&M Records to run Geffen Records. He made me his first hire in their new digital department, which was called New Media at the time. Now, how ironic is it that now in 2025, we're in the next phase of new media. You know, I got my first label job working, you know, in the new media / digital marketing department. They weren't even calling it digital marketing yet. I told them that video content was going to be the wave of the future and was going to be the driving force of, you know, the internet and new media and all of that. And I knew that from watching Smack DVD, Sub-Zero, Hood to Hood, Hood Affairs, you know, like all of these different DVD magazines that, you know, I was accustomed to watching. I knew that people wanted to see this type of content on the internet. They wanted to see this day in the life content on the internet. They wanted to, you know, see all that. So they bought me a camera. I followed Jibbs around. I followed Snoop around. I followed Common around. I followed Nelly Furtado. I followed Mary J. Blige. All of these artists, you know, that were on the label. Slim Thug, he was on Geffen back then. Worked with him on this Boss of All Bosses album and gained a good rapport with him. But I knew that the wave of the future was video content. And so even though in that day, those artists weren't as comfortable being in front of the camera the way that artists, you know, just use their phones and, you know, film content, I just knew that that was, you know, gonna win fans over. And, you know, it's crazy because nowadays I can still go on like Slim Thug or Snoop or some of these artists' pages and see some of the content that I was actually filming and that I was actually working on, you know, back then, or ideas that I had that, you know, actually came to fruition. So, you know, all of that was me just taking chances on myself and believing in myself, in the vision and everything, and, you know, pushing towards that. So again, you know, me moving out of town, me leaving my hometown, you know, was something that was essential for me to reach my optimal success. And so whenever people ask me, do you have to leave home to be successful? You don't have to. But if you're from a place that doesn't have as many resources, then you can leave home, gain knowledge, get put in position, and then you can bring resources back to your city. You know, use the things that you've learned to, you know, maybe help other artists, other creatives, other execs, you know, and things like that. So I definitely recommend getting outside of your comfort zone, move away from home if need be, get out there because the world is a lot bigger than just your hometown and where you from. So you need to experience all of what the world has to offer us, you know, and that's something that I've learned over the years. And that's just real spit from your boy Spit.